Hello there. I thought I'd just do a quick video with regard to the latest episode of We Need to Talk About Lucy Letby, which is over on Spotify, which is presented by Peter Elston and retired Dr. Michael McConville. It's a special episode this week, as it's titled, and it's called A Sad Day, and it's in respect of the dreadful, awful, in my view, utterly corrupt decision not to allow Lucy Letby and her legal team to bring their appeal. I'm doing this video just to give the link below for it, just to, if there's anyone who sees this video who hasn't listened to any of these podcasts. We're up to number 14 at the moment. It's going through everything in very granular detail, all through the RCPCH report, and we'll be moving on in the future through all other aspects of the case and the investigation and how the whole thing was constructed, and all a lot more of the medical evidence. Obviously, having Dr. McConville there is excellent in that regard, in particular to his medical knowledge and experience. So I'm going to link it below, but just a couple of salient points that stuck out to me was that Dr. McConville in particular here was he mentioned how the air embolus air embolus research, that was the paper that was used by Evans, and Jairam looked at it, and the whole prosecution used it as their cornerstone to apparently prove that there was intentional harm through air embolus in many of the cases, that Lucy had deliberately injected air into the baby in one way or another. That Dr. McConville in this episode, he kind of really trashes the paper in and of itself. I've heard through another source that Professor Lee himself, the author of the paper, was attending the application for leave to appeal, and said that the prosecution completely misused and abused his paper, that it was used in completely the wrong way, the wrong conclusions were drawn from it. And he mentioned, I understand, that Evans in particular, his approach, his way of reaching his decisions was completely wrong in his view. This is a guy that wrote the paper that they, prosecution and Evans, based all their decisions on in terms of intended harm through deliberate air embolus, causing air embolus through injection of air into the veins of various children, of a number of children, because there were different ways that Lucy Letby apparently harmed the children, and she kept on changing her approach apparently, but the air embolus ones really cover quite a few of them. So we have that, and we have Dr. McConville in this episode really taking that paper as a whole to task and saying it should have been withdrawn as a paper. Not only should it not have been misused and abused in a court of law and used as a kind of plank of the prosecution to damn Lucy Letby in a completely unfair and false way, but that the paper itself was worthless. I don't know enough to concur with that or disagree with it, but that's Dr. McConville's view. But certainly in the application for appeal that was made originally, when they cited the four grounds before the decision was made, Dr. Lee, I don't know if he's a professor, Dr. Lee, he's American Chinese professor or doctor, I think he may be a professor. He said, well, you've completely misused my research. You've misused this paper. You've kind of shoehorned it in here, and your conclusions aren't valid based on the paper that I wrote. That's what he's saying. That's what he said. But still, the judges, the clowns in gowns, as Gemma O'Doherty calls them, the clowns in gowns, these corrupt judges, as they seem to be corrupt everywhere about everything pretty much, they denied Lucy the chance to appeal. Then this episode goes on to a lot of other aspects of this, and about other miscarriages, and the Colin Norris case is mentioned there, which happened over 20 years ago, and Colin Norris is still in prison. He was convicted of poisoning adults with insulin. But in recent years, a professor who's recently died, Professor Vincent Marks, was meant to be one of the top experts on insulin, in all kinds of aspects of insulin, and certainly insulin poisoning and what to look for. His research meant that the people that were fighting for Colin Norris, and have been all these years, ensured that the CCRC, the Criminal Cases Review Commission, eventually accepted these arguments and referred the matter back to the Court of Appeal. This is after he's already been in prison for 20 years. And they did that referring back to the Court of Appeal in 2021. So they're saying to the Court of Appeal, look, there's some very compelling evidence here from Vincent Marks' research. Professor Vincent Marks has sadly died, but his research is there, and his research shows that elderly people, as was the case in the Colin Norris case, can sometimes be hypoglycemic because of natural changes of aging, and that's a very serious blow to the prosecution, and the prosecution's the prosecution's case that it was intended harm again. So we have that, so we have a 3-year period when they haven't even answered. So that's what we're dealing with. That's the level of lack of care about people's lives and liberty that we're dealing with the judiciary. They're scum. They're scum. Let's face it. Maybe there are some good ones here and there. I don't know. The system's evil. The system is utterly corrupted. That you can have that referred to you when somebody's been in prison for 20 years, a real genuine information, which must show that the conviction's unsafe, and you're sitting on it for 3 years and doing nothing, and still doing nothing to this day. This is the Court of Appeal I'm talking about. And to get the CCRC to even do something, that's a bloody, like climbing Mount Everest in the first place. They're glacial. They're terrible. Ask Andrew Malkinson about that, how bad they are, and the Court of Appeal, how bad they are. How rotten this system is, how disgusting it is. I'm very upset today, for a change. I'm reading some of my notes here from listening to this episode. I'll link it below. It's episode 14. Please listen to the podcast if you're interested in the Lucy Letby case. Don't listen to me, listen to this podcast. It's got 2 fantastic presenters there. They're going through it. They're a long way from finishing. There's going to be many, many more episodes. There's so much to cover. It's making me wondering that this system, as deceitful, as treacherous and hideous as it is, this so-called justice system, so-called legal system, inveigled and all mixed up with the scumbags of politicians and other concerned parties, as that it might even end up being used as a way to say, well, we can't have any jury trials then because it's beyond the jury to understand this. And in this case, the jury was simply overwhelmed with all that ridiculous number of charges. It bombarded them to the extent that they just couldn't. They went with guilty. It's just not fair on a jury to do that. And as I've said in previous videos, and this is my view, that I think some people disagree with it, but my view is that, the first part of my view is that without the insulin cases, none of the actual murder cases would have ever got to trial. And that's been substantiated by what Evans and other people have said, that the so-called insulin cases were the so-called smoking gun. But it works the other way as well, as I said in a previous video. If it was just the insulin cases, the smoking gun, it's in my video called When the Smoking Gun Doesn't Smoke, a couple of weeks ago. If it was just those cases, they individually wouldn't have got to trial. They wouldn't have been charged. They wouldn't have been found even. And more than that, they wouldn't even have been looked for. Not found, not investigated, not charged, not prosecuted. None of it. That's how weak the components are. That's how weak they are alone. It's only in the context of all these other fabricated murders that they then become this smoking gun. Individually, they're nothing. All of them, all the cases are nothing in terms of evidence against Lucy Letby. Individually, they're nothing. It's just the way they pile them all in together, bombard the jury with a bunch of mostly corrupt witnesses, I have to say, yeah, corrupt so-called expert witnesses. I keep saying corrupt, and I mean it, and the whole system, and the judge, Goss as well, and obviously the police, corrupt, yeah. Where was I? I'm just having a look at the other, yeah, so might it be in the fullness of time when this is overturned, as it should be, they say, well, okay, it's time for the end of jury trials, and they'll be doing that to suit their purposes. It might be that cases like this shouldn't have jury trials like this because of the specialist knowledge and the overwhelm of medical and scientific information. A jury is meant to, it's just, 12 people off the street. You might have a doctor in there, but then you might have nobody with any of that kind of knowledge. I'm gabbling a bit, I know, a bit excited, a bit overexcited. So, yeah, there was something. I think I went over the Lee paper, Professor Lee paper, which is this air embolism paper that the author of which says himself it was abused by the prosecution and misused and abused, and that the wrong conclusions were drawn from it. In other words, it shouldn't have been in there at all. Just imagine if it hadn't been in there at all. Again, we wouldn't have heard about this case. Wouldn't have heard about it. They've distorted and shoehorned it in there in a completely unjust and unverifiable and immoral way. The only other thing I want to say about this episode of We Need to Talk About Lucy Letby is something that comes up between Dr. Michael McConville and Peter Elston, in which they seem to be saying that the June trial, if it is guilty, what difference does it make to Lucy Letby? Because of she's a whole life tariff and all those life sentences. But I do disagree with that. I think they meant it just in that if it fell that way. In other words, if it went to guilty, what difference would it make to the sentence? And I agree with that. It wouldn't make any difference to Lucy to the sentence. But either way it will go, whether it's guilty or can't reach a verdict again, or not guilty. In whatever way that goes, it's going to make a material difference to the story that's becoming more and more public about this outrageous miscarriage of justice. If there's a not guilty verdict, obviously that plays into all the concerns that people are raising, and this burgeoning, increasing sense of concern that this is a terrible miscarriage of justice. If it's guilty, equally on the other side, the system itself thinks that's another nail in the coffin. And I think they've chosen that case cynically, in part to stop people talking about it leading up to the inquiry, to quell the talking about it. Fantastic that it could obviously only happen from another country. That New Yorker article from Rachel Aviv came through and was made available for us through this archive system, and I'll be going back to that and carrying on looking at that and making commentary as I go along. So thank God for that. And but yes, I just see that whichever way that trial goes, it's not. The outcome isn't negligent. The outcome isn't negligible. Sorry, the outcome is not nothing. In whatever way it goes, it's all part of this ongoing war for the truth here, and it is a war. It's like a spiritual war, like with so many other things going on in the country and in the world. There's a spiritual war about this case, and it's fundamentally truth versus lies, and it's good versus evil. That's what I believe. There's a spiritual component here. That's what it's become. This is the evil that men do. Well, it could be men or women, but the evil that human beings do versus the truth, and the truth will be heard, and it will come out, and justice will be done, and Lucy Letby will be freed. But for God's sake, we can't allow it 20 years like Colin Norris to even get to a court of appeal. I mean, that's outrageous. Dr. Michael McConville says at the end, he said, I don't know much about the law and I don't know how it works in other countries, but there should be an automatic right to an appeal. And I agree. And Peter Elston says, yeah, in America you do have a right to an appeal. It's sinister, weird and sick that our so-called best justice system in the world doesn't have that right enshrined. It's just another level of how moribund and corrupt and dirty and ugly that system is. Same system that's keeping Julian Assange in prison and like killing him slowly. The process as the punishment. Right, I think I've gabbled a bit through all that. Hopefully it made some sense, but the main reason I've done this video is to link this this fantastic podcast from Peter and Michael to anyone who hasn't seen it, heard it already, and to tell you about this latest episode. And I just hope anyone who sees this video and hasn't seen any other ones, they'll get the link and they'll start listening to go back to episode 1. That's the best way, and move through. And by the time you get to number 14, they'll have done some more. It's unstoppable now. Oh, there was another part towards the end of this episode. I'm not doing it telling you all this so you don't need to hear it. You've got to hear it, but I'm just picking up the main points that I thought struck me hardest. Is that once that June trial is over, and again, whichever way it goes, and this is what I said the other day in a recent video to do with the New Yorker article, is that there's journalists, good journalists, I believe, with integrity, waiting to produce more articles and documentaries, etc., in relation to this. It's going to explode. We've already had David Davis asking questions about it in Parliament with regard to open justice. It's not going to go away. It's only going to grow, the disquiet, the concern, and then the outrage as it becomes more obvious to more people that this is one of the worst miscarriages of justice we've ever seen. And it's quite possible. I know the basic outlines of the Colin Norris case. I watched a few documentaries. It's obvious he should be allowed an appeal. It's disgusting that it's taken 20 years and it's still taking longer because these arseholes at the Court of Appeal are sitting on, what are they doing? They're sitting on their wigs, whatever they're doing, sitting on their stupid wigs and stupid gowns. It's been referred to them by the CCRC back in 2021 and they've done fuck all with it since, while he spent another 3 years in prison, not even giving him a chance, not even giving him a date for the court appearance, for the appeal to work through. How sick is that? What contempt have they got for other individuals' lives? What a rotten... Something is rotten in the state of Britain, and it has been for probably since the year dot. But it's coming out more and more now in so many ways. We're more aware of it. It's more overt. It's more gross, and there's more people talking about it. That's the one good thing about the internet, is that people are talking about these things more and more and sharing information with each other. Anyway, take care. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.